October 22nd meeting of the, I'm sorry, 26th. October 22nd, August 26th meeting of the Fayetteville Board of Education. And we have Riley Garrison here, our FHS SU co-president, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hi, I'm Riley. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Riley. Alan, will you call the roll?
Nika Weitzman.
Here.
Megan Hurley. Tim Hudson.
Here.
Justin Eichmann.
Here.
Katrina Osborne.
Here.
Tracy Pomeroy.
Here.
And Keaton Smith.
Here.
Okay, and I do not think, we don't have any citizen or recognition next month. Okay. All right, well, we have a bunch of people here hoping to make some comments during our citizen participation portion of the agenda. And typically, I mean, our policy allows for only 30 minutes, and we give people 5 minutes. But of course, we have, I think, 25 people who've spoken or who've signed up to speak. And so I would like to ask the board, would you be willing to accommodate an extension of that policy to allow folks to speak? We have 25 people here, which would be tough to squeeze into 25 minutes. Would that be okay?
I'd ask for if maybe we would.
Yes, and
the
so
time a little bit.
So what I would like to ask from the folks who are speaking is if you would be willing to cut your comments down to 2 to 3 minutes, just so that we can accommodate everyone who has planned to speak here today. That way we're flexing on this policy in 2 different directions, and so I would really appreciate that. So that being said, I also just wanted to touch on some guidelines with regard to citizen participation. Please avoid any references, statements, or conduct reasonably likely to result in disruption or undue delay in the orderly transaction of the business scheduled for consideration by the board. Avoid any personal attacks or any identified individual or group. This is your time to speak. It's not a back and forth dialogue with the board. Refrain from cumulative or repetitive remarks. So if someone has already said what you wanted to say, just echo that person. Just say, I agree with Susan, or whatever, if you would, and that will allow you to have a little bit more time to speak. Please refrain from obscenity, vulgarity, and other breach of respect, obviously. Refrain from words or statements which, from their usual construction and common acceptance, are construed as insults and tend to breach the peace. And please comply with the time limits that I mentioned previously. So those are the guidelines that I would like to request of all the folks speaking tonight. But that being said, our first person that has signed up to speak tonight is Mr. Russell Ritchie. Nope, okay. We'll come back to that. Next person, AJ Boyer. I should have also mentioned, Jennifer is going to run a clock. Are you AJ? Okay. Jennifer is going to run a clock for you. You should be able to see right there in front of you on your stand. Is that where it is?
Where?
So you...
It'll display.
You'll see it in front of you. And she'll have,
Okay.
so you'll know about how long you've been speaking.
Okay.
All right?
This is my time.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm AJ Boyer. We have had two girls in the Fayetteville public school system, and we pulled them out this year. I want to tell you a story about our two brave girls who last year were two of the only kids I know who refused to be bullied into depriving themselves oxygen. They were refused entry into their schools the first day, even though they had required medical notes. The nurse belittled my oldest about her dyspnea, and after lying about the policy, tried to scare my oldest wearing a mask right in front of me. And this was the beginning of an incredible journey my children were on. They were isolated, called out, told even though they were the proper distance, they had to move farther away. Students were advised not to speak to my oldest. They were bullied, and teachers had discussions in class about how not wearing masks kills people. For all of their hardship, we thank you all. My husband and I may be the only two parents who will tell you their children learned the most valuable lesson of their lives last year. These girls were the epitome of selflessness. They had everything to lose and yet chose to stand in honor and faith for those who had no voice, for those who had no choice but to put on the mask sheep, for those who chose to, as a parent recently stated, go along just to get along. Equity, inclusion, these are only words spoke to make people think you are doing good. If you control the words, you control the mind, right? Where is the inclusion when a child comes to school without a mask because they can't breathe? They're depressed from not being able to see smiles. They can't hear the teacher. You send them off and ostracize them in front of their peers. Is that inclusion? These girls were 7 and 11, but they can teach us a lot about courage. You see, they know that Jesus was ostracized and persecuted his whole time on this earth. Yet it did not stop him from doing good. We are promised we will have hardship in this world, and we are under attack from the enemy. There is no neutral ground. Ever wonder how a communist country comes about? Bah, look around. Who is your shepherd? Back in pre-pandemic days, when words actually meant something, putting a dirty, sweat-filled, spit-filled, bacterial cloth over your child's nose and mouth would have been considered child abuse. The virus is scary, yes, but do you not drive your car because you may get in a wreck? Do you not walk out your door because anything could happen and you may die? Do you send your child out wearing a football helmet because they may get hit in the head with a falling branch, coconut, or piano? Did you wear a mask in flu season? Did your child? Wait, where did the flu season go? Look at the data, look at the statistics, educate yourself, know what you can do to treat the virus properly if you do get it. If you're at high risk, take extra precautions. If you want to get vaccinated, do it. But if you tell my child to wear a football helmet all day because they may get hit by a piano, you are no longer thinking rationally. You have either succumbed to the psychological warfare or you are part of the dictatorship. We refuse to take part in your experiment. We will not allow you to use our children as lab rats. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ.
And God bless you all.
Our next person is Jenny Lauren Dowden. Jenny Lauren. Jenny Lauren Dowden. Oh, the speaker now? Yes. Jenny Lauren
Dowden.
That's okay.
It's okay. I would like to introduce you to the Converge social justice consulting firm of New Orleans and the role it plays in the Fayetteville Public School District. The information I share with you is found on the firm's website, as well as information obtained from the district through a Freedom of Information request. As stated on their website, quote, the work of Converge is consistently rooted in their values and intersectionality analysis of systemic oppression and racism. Their collective action statement says, we believe in dismantling historic oppression requires collective and strategic action to create a radically just new world. The agency's focus and stated values will be acceptable to you if you support values and principles rooted in critical race theory. The terminology used, the stated vision and actions of the social justice firm are rooted in the tenets, values, and policies promoting critical race theory. If you have questions about this in our district, I point you to Dr. Sheldon Lanier. The district has spent thousands of dollars on him as a consultant. Look at his Equity 102 course description. Lanier specifically states, quote, this course will use the 6 critical tenets of critical race theory as its conceptual framework, end quote. Converge partners with clients like the Ford Foundation, the Walton Foundation, Walmart Foundation, and George Soros's Open Society Foundation, representing over $50 billion in philanthropic investment worldwide. Why is this important to our district? Since 2018, the Fayetteville Public School District has embarked on a very strategic plan to build leaders for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This began with the district's participation in the True Northwest Arkansas Trained Cohort and continues through their partnership with the U of A Ideals Institute. These partnerships have led to the implementation of the 5-year Equity Competency Plan. The plan clearly states that the program is designed to transform the educational structures and culture of our district, and the success of the program would be measured through a, quote, equity lens based on DEI values. The Converge social justice consulting firm was hired to design and manage the initiative in which our district participated. The influence of the social justice consulting firm is found all throughout the 5-year equity plan, now being implemented in its 3rd year in our school district. We have asked you, the administration and the board, if CRT is a part of our district's plans, policies, and curriculum. Your answer has been that it is not. The FOIA information that we have, now over 8,000 pages, is evidence that your response is neither truthful nor factual. The work of Converge is consistently rooted in their DEI values and an intersectional analysis of systemic oppression and racism. The promotion of CRT values and principles is clear. The Fayetteville Public School District is one of their partners. Corporation and foundation money is being used to buy the ideology of critical race theory into our schools by way of grants and initiatives with which our district has partnered. Why would anyone on this board or in this administration think it is appropriate for a self-described radical social justice consulting firm to influence policies, programs, professional development, and ultimately classroom curriculum in our school district? I can find no reasonable or justifiable explanation for you to allow our school district to be used as a tool by social justice activists to promote their agenda in our district, affecting the education of our children.
Thank you, Danielle. Next, we have Lisa Molnar.
My name is Lisa Molnar, and I have been a parent of the FPS school system for 12 years. I have 2 recent FHS graduates, one in 20 and one in 21, and I have a current junior at FHS. I want to start by saying what an excellent education my children have gotten here. We have lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, the suburbs of Chicago, Boise, Idaho, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and the schools here are top-notch, and we are so appreciative for them. I also want to voice my support and thanks to you for instituting a mask mandate following the guidance of the ADH, the CDC, the City Health Officer, Dr. Marty Sharkey, the American Academy of Pediatrics, UAMS, local hospitals, and every health professional I personally know. So thank you for that. Public safety necessitates rules. We stop at stop signs. We don't smoke in public places. We don't drink and drive. And for now, we wear masks. I depend on our schools and teachers to safely educate my children in science, math, history, literature, and give them the tools to think critically in the absence of the influence of religion. I attended 12 years of Catholic private education. If I wanted my children taught through a religious lens, I would send them to a private school. In order for my daughter to get her education this year, I need her butt in a seat. She will wear a mask. She is vaccinated, but I have reached the limits of what I can do to protect her and our community. It is now up to the school board and our village to do the same for the health and well-being of all of our Fayetteville neighbors. I want to end with this word of caution. We all know the old adage of the squeaky wheel getting greased, but I would say it is a waste of time and energy to grease a squeaky wheel on a rusty bike that has much bigger issues. Thank you for your time and for your dedication to all of our children.
Thank you. With Angie Maxwell.
Thank y'all for letting us participate. My name is Angie Maxwell. I'm a mom of a Fayetteville Public School middle school student, and I came here tonight to mention 2 things. So first, I wanted to echo the sentiments that I'm sure you'll hear from others tonight, express my gratitude for your decision to issue the mask mandate. I know it's a hard choice. Beyond the obvious increased health protections, your decision to protect each child's equal access to education is so critical. So as y'all all know, per the CDC and ADE guidelines, both a positive student and their close probable contacts have to be masked to avoid quarantine if they're under 12. So my individual choice to have my child wearing a mask is not enough to protect her access to education. Without a mask mandate, her equal access to education depends on the choices of other parents. So freedom isn't really free if someone else has to pay the price. The second thing I wanted to mention, for that, I've kind of put on my professional hat. So I'm currently the Diane D. Blair Endowed Chair in Southern Studies and Political Science at the University of Arkansas, though I'm speaking here only for myself. My research areas are political psychology and voting behavior and public opinion. About 18 months ago, I started to notice the acronym CRT being mentioned by partisan think tanks such as the Heritage Foundation and its Discovery Institute. Imagine my surprise that a highly technical legal studies framework for analyzing the multivariate ways in which racial categories are defined by the law historically was receiving such attention. I watched as the use of the acronym increased in frequency and noted that its own definition seemed to expand to cover everything from diversity and inclusion scholarship to historical interpretations of slavery and Reconstruction to contemporary social movements. I realized that, like many times in the past, the acronym had become a catch-all phrase for trepidation, anger, and or resentment. In this case, towards the changing demographics of this country. It's very similar to the way anti-evolution in the 1920s became a catch-all that was less about science and much more about parents' fear that their roaring 20s children were moving past their parents' Victorian-era norms and values. Or the way the parents of the teenagers in the 1960s were afraid their kids would reject all kinds of authority. But a warning, this time is a little different because this time it isn't wholly grassroots. This time there are national political organizations pouring gasoline, so to speak, on parents' fire. Organizations like Parents Defending Education, Moms for Liberty, and No Left Turn in Education are run by seasoned political operatives, and their websites provide detailed instructions about how to create woke at social media pages and anonymous tip lines to report wokeness. Many local groups, including one here, have cut and pasted their website content from these national political organizations. And then there are a host of other groups that produce inflammatory content that can be shared. These sources are often extremely misleading, highly sophisticated in their presentation, and pose as educational in nature. PragerU, for example, is not a university, but a multimedia political campaign producing videos that have been discredited at length. There are new political action committees intended to directly target school boards in an effort to manufacture outrage, polarize communities, and drive their targeted supporters to the polls. I've never seen attempts to weaponize at the local level this way. That's my warning. I've never seen the propaganda packaged with such sophistication, so much so that many parents would find it very difficult to judge the credibility of the misinformation. There is no doubt that there are important conversations about race and diversity that need to happen in education. No doubt. I ask only that you be aware of the misinformation campaign targeting parents and school boards, as you will undoubtedly become increasingly inundated with criticism and materials between now and the election cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Dr. Marty Sharkey. What's up?
Hi, my name's Dr. Marty Sharkey, and I am here as the Fayetteville City Health Officer and representing the Fayetteville Board of Health, as well as the City of Fayetteville. And we are coming tonight to express our gratitude for you, the school board, and your leadership, and being in step with our recommendations for a universal mask mandate in schools. Dozens of studies have confirmed that the benefit of universal masking not only prevents illness, prevents hospitalization, and prevents death. Today alone, we had over 200 new cases of COVID-19 in our county. Our hospitals are full. Your actions and leadership are helping to prevent lives, save lives, prevent hospitalizations, and keep our healthcare system safe. for everybody in our community. And for that, we thank you. And that's all.
Thank you, Miss. Sarahlanders.
My name is Sarahlanders, and if my voice shakes, I apologize. That mask was giving me anxiety. I would like you to understand something. You are not my family's doctor. You are not my family's moral authority, and you are not my family's caregiver. Your job is to educate. So far, you're teaching my child that putting fear and lack of scientific data over her well-being by forcing her out of her public education because of experimental masking and political pandering is appalling. She has anxiety issues that were witnessed by her school staff, including her principal, her assistant principal, and 2 counselors, one being a physician. She loves and adores the staff and the kids, but is unable to attend. She's smart. She was about to get tested for gifted and talented. For now, she's pulled from the district in hopes that you change your policies. And you know what else is appalling? Trying to sneak in divisive critical race theory, any equity plan, and your blatant indoctrination of our children. Isn't our country in enough peril? These teachings are discriminatory ideologies that violate Title IV of the Equal Protection Clause and Article 2 of the Arkansas Constitution. Matthew 18:6 says, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea." Choice needs to be given back to the parents. I did not ask to co-parent with the government. We're watching you, we're paying attention, and I urge you to do the right thing by these kids to stop with the globalist agendas. And I pray that each of you grows a conscience. Thank you.
April, Florida. No? Okay. Sandra Cooper.
Hi, my name is Sandra Cooper, and I just want to say, first of all, thank you for implementing the mask mandate in Fayetteville Public Schools. I have 2 children in the school district. My daughter is 13 and fully vaccinated. My son is 8 and not yet eligible for the vaccination. Our son, Sadler, has Down syndrome. I am very thankful the mask mandate is across all our schools, even though some are vaccinated, because they could potentially pass along the virus. The percentage of kids who will succumb to COVID is very low, but this is not the case when we're looking at someone with Down syndrome. An article out of Yale Medicine stated individuals with Down syndrome who get COVID are 4 times more likely to be hospitalized and 10 times more likely to die. One of the children in Arkansas who died of COVID had Down syndrome. My child, Sadler, has the same rights as any typical child. The Individuals with Disability Education Act allows free and public education for both my children. Children with disabilities should not be unfairly isolated from their classmates and peers. The law requires these children to be educated alongside all the other children. If there was not a mask policy for all children in Fayetteville Public Schools during this outbreak, which has put a huge stress on our medical community, my child could not be in his typical classroom learning with his peers. This would be an enormous impact on his education, socialization, and most importantly, his emotional and mental health. Not only would it keep him from being in class with his peers learning and socializing, but also keep them from learning from him. And let me tell you what, he's got a lot to teach some kids. Sadler doesn't mind a mask, but asking him to unmask is a detriment to him and my daughter. I would like to say thank you again, Fayetteville Public Schools and parents, for protecting my children and allowing them to be included with your children in each and every classroom. Thank you for teaching your children to care and protect for others who may not be able to care for themselves and are vulnerable like mine. Thank you.
We have Melissa Ahrens. Melissa Ahrens. Okay. Shayla Oldham.
I'm a local doctor, and I'm a critical thinker who does not blindly accept the misinformation the CDC is shoving down everyone's throat and the naive are believing as gospel. I can share multiple studies that prove my points as to why it should be parental choice to not wear a mask or vaccinate for that matter, just as someone else can share multiple studies that support their different opinion. But we will not engage in a frontal lobe battle because I believe neither one of us is going to change our stance or our opinion when bombarded by a bunch of facts. And surely the fact that medical decisions are even being discussed at a school board meeting is ridiculous. The CDC, ADH, and WHO websites can't even make up their own minds or agree, and you wonder why the division and the hypocrisy? You board members are elected officials, and you work for the citizens that elected you. You should heed the outcry from the parents who refuse to allow boards and school employees to make medical and life-altering decisions for our children. You board members gave yourselves a big pat on the back at your last meeting when Policy 1.19 was enacted, stating it was less strict this year. The teachers could remove their masks when instructing. Kids could remove their masks when 6 feet apart. This is not happening in the schools. I am hearing it is stricter this year and less mask breaks are occurring. And the note of exemptions is a joke. Policy 1.19 states that principals of the schools have the authority to grant medical exemptions with documented medical conditions. This is far from true. From the lips of many principals, they do not have the authority. And I can tell you from my own experience with my own son who has a 504 and a documented medical condition that they are not granting his medical exemption. Board members, do not feel proud of yourselves that you have given these kids an out, because you haven't. We are having a lot of pushback and resistance. The Fayetteville School District is acting as they have more authority and better knowledge than our own doctors and parental choice for medical decisions for our children. You have failed these children. You are placing policy in front of the physical, mental, social, and emotional health of every child. You are teaching children that the air is toxic and everyone around them is sick. We were told last year if we mask and quarantine, it would resolve itself, and it didn't help a thing. So why are you pretending it will now? It should be every parent's choice, every staff member's choice to mask or not, to take an experimental vaccine or not, because that is our God-given American right. You have a board member who posted on social media, and I quote, "But personal choice matters and can make a difference to our kids' health and safety. So my personal choice doesn't matter because we have different opinions? You hypocrite." We will not lock down, mask mandate, adhere to the CDC's anti-science mask guidelines. We will not show vaccine passports. We will not be forced into random screenings or testings. Let it be duly noted any further attempt to force, persuade, intimidate, bully, coerce our children into masking or vaccination will be immediately met with litigation. Litigation not only for medical discrimination, but litigation that would take funding you receive for our children and give it to the parents to best decide where their children should be educated. End Policy 1.19. Stop interfering with my rights as a parent. You are not protecting my child. You are failing and hurting him. Quit taking our God-given rights away. You don't have the authority.
Cassie Booth. Cassie Booth. Cassie Booth.
And 80 seconds is not near enough time to say what we really feel or what our concerns are, offer creative ideas for improvement. It's not even enough time to give you praise for the things that we love that you're doing in our district, and that's what brings me to my main point of why I wanted to speak today. This short form, 3-minute, one-sided conversation is not the best way to conduct this type of business. This aggressive, divisive nature between Fayetteville parents and school administration, it's heartbreaking. I'm shaking thinking about it. My wish and hope for my community is that we could come together in a more long format conversation with honesty, vulnerability, open-mindedness, and maturity. I believe I represent today the silent majority, the vast number of parents in FPS that are tired, concerned, downright saddened by the way this relationship has evolved over the past few years. I personally do not fully agree with every single thing that some people will say tonight, but I also don't fully agree with everything that the school board administration has done in terms of the way that they're handling these big topics, especially with communication on such important subject matters. There has to be a better way, you guys. In fact, there is a better way. This is not the first and only public school district that's had to tackle hot-button issues. Our country was the first to experiment with the democratic process. Elected officials, open communication, compromise. Everyone in this room has benefited from those freedoms. We can do this better. Let's have one-on-one coffee with each other and talk for a couple hours, just as Megan and I did this spring. It was great. Let's sit around a table with maybe a single board member so that we don't have to call the press every time. Let's have honest, civil discourse with one another. Let's not have a school board meeting where people yell and get upset for 180 seconds and all of you stare back at us because you're not allowed to respond. It's weird. It's not normal. It's definitely not normal among adults. Let's not air out all of our differences on a Facebook post in the comments section. It's immature and unprofessional at its best. There are honest, good-hearted, well-intentioned people sitting at the desk in front of me, but there's also honest, good-hearted, well-intentioned people behind me. Our goal is the same, right? A great education for our kids. Can we turn over a new leaf today and decide that we're all on the same team? This is not liberal versus conservative. This is not school board members versus white supremacist racists. This is not evil liberal school board members versus Christian parents. It's so much more than that. Labeling each other like this is nothing but hurtful, and it's definitely unproductive. It sets us back as opposed to moving us forward. We can do better. Thanks.
We have Reverend Evan Garner.
Thank you. My name is Evan Garner. I'm the parent of 4 children, 3 of whom are students in Fayetteville Public Schools. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for helping my spouse and me feel a little more comfortable about sending our kids to school this year. I know this has not been easy, but I am grateful. It is hard not walking my kindergartner to her classroom, but it's important that I not go in the building. It's important that we wear masks. It's important that we are as safe as we can reasonably be. Because as hard as it is not to walk my daughter into school, it would be a lot harder to walk into her hospital room or to even have to care for her at home. The decisions you've made have been hard, but you've allowed science and the best information at your disposal to inform those decisions, and I am very grateful for that. The other thing I'd like to mention is about the role of education, about systemic racism in our schools. And I want you to know that I'm not afraid of an analogy, of an acronym. I'm not afraid of systemic racism being taught in our schools. I'm afraid of what happens if my children grow up not recognizing the way in which systemic racism has prevented some of their classmates from attaining the same opportunities that they have. I teach my children that they can be anything they want to be if they work hard at it and focus on it. They need to recognize when that isn't true for someone else in their class simply because of their background, their ethnicity, the color of their skin. If we don't help our children know the ways in which systemic racism is a part of our history, then it will never change. Don't be afraid of the acronyms. Don't be afraid of facing truth. Be afraid of what happens if we cower in fear. Thank you.
Danielle Sargent. Danielle.
My name is Danielle Musselman. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the board for requiring masks this year. As the mother of an 11-year-old and sister of a heart transplant recipient that is severely immunocompromised, I am both deeply affected and invested in protecting my family, so thank you. I also want to address the resistance to incorporating the foundations of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our learning spaces. The first time I was called the N-word, I was 16 years old. I was sitting at a stoplight when the car next to me rolled down the window. I thought he was going to ask for directions. He did not. Instead, he repeatedly screamed the N-word at me, paralyzing me with fear. I could barely drive myself home. The crazy thing about this traumatic experience that I still think about 30 years later is that I didn't tell anyone because I was embarrassed. I was actually embarrassed about being the victim of racism. The reason for that is because racism wasn't talked about then. The fact that racism still exists in the United States of America was not spoken about, and that is wrong. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood and school, and my white friends had zero idea about what I went through as a black person living in America. That is wrong. It is impossible to be empathetic about that which you are ignorant. Now, as a grown adult, I am no longer afraid or embarrassed to use my voice. I know how to explain microaggressions to people when they happen, which I will say is on a regular basis. I'm raising a black daughter, and I don't want her to go through her life as a victim of microaggressions, ignorance, or racism. We need to teach our kids, regardless of their color, what these things are and that they are wrong. I also think that the best teachers of these issues are those who have been properly trained. I went through my own training last summer on this topic, and without it, I wouldn't be able to come here today and articulate on this subject. My daughter has heard the N-word at school. She has been accused of being adopted when out with her white father. She has been asked if it's possible for black people to get a suntan. And I won't even get started on the comments about her hair. These are microaggressions. They are hurtful, and we as a society need to do better. Many of you were born with the privilege of not worrying about these things. I was not. My daughter was not. And I can't understand why anyone would think that that is okay. Regardless of what you think, racism is not okay, and our children need to understand that it's not okay, and they need to be taught that it is not okay. My daughter deserves to have the basic and, shall I say, Christian values of diversity, equity, and inclusion in her learning spaces. If you are opposed to this, I suggest that you look in the mirror and assess what values you actually believe in. Thank you.
We have Johnpianowski. Did I say that right? Oh, it's challenging. Oh my goodness.
Well, let me start by just sharing my appreciation for Danielle Musselman's testimony. The previous comments about the importance of discussing systemic racism in an educational system and in a community. And also, if I could co-sign Angie Maxwell's eloquent discussion of critical race theories, history, and what it is and how we got here. With that said, I'll confine my comments to how we've approached the pandemic. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Johnpianowski. I am a Woodland Junior High parent, a professor of educational leadership at the University of Arkansas, and I've been an educator for 30 years. My job is to study and teach about how schools are led. And among one of the greatest honors of my work life is for the last over 20 years, more than once a week for sure, I get to listen to teachers and principals from all over the country talk to me about their school day. And I can tell you what you already know, that in my lifetime, it's never been harder to do this job. I think the same might be said for being a parent. Throughout the pandemic, Fayetteville, like school systems everywhere, have had to wrestle with their role not only as educators, but also at the center of how their communities address public health and the food security of children. At each step along the way, Fayetteville Public School was a leader in advocating for and implementing strategies to help our children and their families be as safe and healthy as possible, while continuing their journey of living and learning, the journey of simply being kids. You all listen to the science, you experienced educators, and you listen to parents, and you transparently communicated with your community. As a parent, I never had to wonder what you were trying to do or why you were doing it. And I say this as somebody who is a vocal critic of just about every system and how they approach the pandemic. The student meals program mask and distance protocols, improved ventilation, which I know you were talking about back in 2012 at least, and continue to in 2020 and 2021. The COVID dashboard communication, all of these are worthy of a case study in exemplary school system leadership. And while we will always continue to debate how to improve our schools, and I promise I will be in that debate, I could not be more confident that with every step you have taken, that you have done so with the best interest of our children at the very front of your hearts and minds. Most importantly, though, I want to say how immeasurably impressed I have been with the skill, patience, kindness, and dedication of every teacher, counselor, and administrator that has worked with my son in the 3 Fayetteville public schools that he's attended. I would put them up against the very best the nation has to offer, anywhere. With our hospitals overflowing and the latest UAMS forecast giving us notice that the worst of the pandemic is still ahead of us, you are all making a world of possibilities open up for these kids in an impossible situation. There will no doubt be many more tough decisions to be made, but if you continue to make them with keeping our children and community safe as your top priority, even when we disagree, you will have our support. So I simply wanted to add my voice to the chorus of feedback you're receiving about how you've navigated the singular greatest public health crisis of our generation. Thank you.
Brian Parker. Brian Parker. Brian Parker. Nope. Okay. Harold Bemis.
Thank you very much for the chance to speak tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you, officers, for helping guide this conversation and offering the mask that we can come in and peaceably assemble. I don't typically wear one, but I graciously do so and take it off so that I can speak and breathe while I'm in this public forum. I've tried to condense my thoughts down to within the time frames that you've mentioned that we're under. And I have chopped and chopped and chopped at this thing because there's a lot to say. I don't think this is an impossible situation. I don't think this is the greatest health crisis that we face as humans. I think there are some very simple solutions, and I do address those. So good evening. To begin, let me first say for the record that my name is Harold Simpson Bemis Jr., and I believe that Jesus is the one true living Son of God. I believe and trust in Him for everything, and may His grace and peace be present in this meeting. I'm here to advocate for every child being forced to succumb to the psychological pressure that has been unlawfully exerted upon them as students of the Fayetteville Public School System by this board. The hearts, minds, and lives of our children are clearly being neglected. We are here to remind you, we parents that are speaking, of your place, that is to serve the citizens of this community and by serving our children, not to dictate. To serve the citizens of this community by serving our children, not to dictate or to coerce them into political or religious ideologies, to teach them about alternative lifestyles or racial theories, or even how to dress, since, of course, the dress code has so conveniently and egregiously been inserted into this discussion. You are not above the laws of the state. Your actions have revealed your willingness and clear intention to undermine the authority of our state's Constitution. To begin, I ask you this: how many of you touched a door handle on the way into this meeting, or perhaps handled anything at all since arriving at this building? How many of you wear the same mask throughout the day, adjusting it to conform more tightly to your face because it gapes a bit here or there? Are you sanitizing or even washing your masks after each use, or washing your hands? If not, then how could they possibly be working in the way that you could only hope that they could? And I say hope because that is the most that they can offer, the hope, not the reality that these cloth or paper masks could even slightly help to filter the microscopic pathogens that you're so desperately trying to contain. You just can't do it. The sterile conditions that you're seeking are impossible to achieve. Can't say it any more simply than that. It's impossible to achieve it. Well, what do the masks do? Well, they hide the faces of our children. They greatly hinder communication, which is still apparently critical for educational purposes. They actually stop the spread of whatever pathogens are really present on their persons. They hinder the inalienable right to breathe fresh air, which is required for any and all activities. And they negatively impact the psychological development of every kid that has to wear one. So based on what data have you made your decision to break state law and mandate the wearing of these masks? What data? What is it that's out there? So my second point begins with another simple question. How many of you have researched the chemical compounds known as hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin? Hot topics, right? Well, you can instantly, on your phones, find volumes of information explaining the validity of their fight against this virus. Very valid. You just have to explore. You have to be willing to look into it. You can also find an opposing narrative, one that discounts the fact that thousands of lives have been saved by these purportedly harmful and ineffective methods of treatment. In lieu of accepting that single false narrative, I implore you, each of you, to do this research. If you have looked into these solutions and actually seen the overwhelming evidence in favor of these protocols, and you've subsequently made these irrational decisions and implemented these unlawful mandates, then you have failed us as a board. And if you've even investigated the claims of those who've saved thousands of lives with these protocols, then you have also failed us as a board, because either way, you failed us as a board. You've failed our children, and you've threatened the future of our communities. There's no other way to look at it.
Mr.
You've either
Bemis,
looked
I'm
at
going
it
to
and you
have to ask
failed.
you to wrap up. I think we've already extended past the 5-minute, actually.
I understand. Well, there's some math involved in that, because I
Okay.
think 5 people have not spoken, so I would graciously
That's not
receive
the
and
way the
accept.
policy works.
It
I'm
would be
afraid
wonderful.
we're obligated to the policy.
So with the availability of viable and affordable solutions to the health concerns that this virus has posed for humanity, I have to ask, why are any of us wearing masks when physicians and healthcare professionals across the world have initiated protocols that have all but eliminated the threat that is posed on humanity?
Thank you, Mr.
They've
Bemis.
eliminated the threat.
Thank you. Our next.
Those of us who've chosen to speak tonight lean into the truth. We rely on its foundation to steady us all. Again, I implore you, teach our children academics and allow us to raise our children the way that we see fit.
Thank you.
One more sentence. May God help you in your decisions. May God help us all as we stand and fight against this growing evil. This battle, too, will soon come to an end, and there is but one that will stand victorious. I strongly suggest, if you haven't already, that you seek his counsel and his forgiveness. He is Christ Jesus, and I side with him. Thank you very much. Thank you for the extension of the time, too.
Our next speaker is Autumn Talbert.
Hi. My name is Autumn Talbert, and my daughters, Viola and June, go to Washington Elementary. Viola's in the 3rd grade, and June is in the 1st grade. After a year of virtual, we were so excited that the girls would be going back to school. They wanted to see their friends, and June, because she went kindergarten virtual, had never been in the school. But in July, when the Delta variant started raging in Arkansas, I became incredibly anxious. I couldn't sleep. I was so worried about what to do with my children. I spoke with other working parents, especially moms, who felt the same way. We were wondering what to do. How would we keep our jobs when the inevitable quarantines happened because masks were disallowed by the Arkansas legislature? What if the schools shut down altogether? How would we keep our children, especially those too young to be vaccinated, safe from COVID? How could we even consider school to be safe without masks? My daughters have no problem wearing masks. They actually think of them as fashion accessories. They decorate them, they match them to their outfits. But what if they were some of the only ones wearing masks at school this fall? Would they be ridiculed and teased? Would they be called sheep? after you all voted yes to require masks, it was like a switch was flipped for many of us. That vote by this board sent a message to the community that the school district cares about the health of our children as much as we do. We were able to look forward to the school year with much less dread. I've been so impressed by the measures taken by Washington Elementary to stop the spread of COVID and to make the children feel comfortable in a scary time. During the virtual open house, each first grade teacher, after talking without their masks on Zoom, put on a mask to show the children how they would appear on the first day so the children would feel comfortable when they saw their teachers. This was a really small gesture, but it was so reassuring. At pickup time, after school has started, my kids are often running and playing in the gym in their after-school program. They're hula hooping, they're drawing. The masks don't slow them down, but they keep them safe. I'd like to thank this board and the administration, the teachers and staff for doing everything to keep our children healthy. I hope you keep up this practice until the Fayetteville Board of Health and the CDC deems it safe for our children to attend school without a mask. I know we're all looking forward to that day, so thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Kristen Klein. Go ahead, Kristen.
Hi, my name is Kristen Klein, and I am here today to ask the board to take a step back and reconsider the current mask mandate that I believe does not follow the science, and that I believe that encroaches on our freedoms and rights that are guaranteed to us by our U.S. Constitution. I'm not going to lie, I was super disappointed when I saw on August 9th that the board decided to go against the will of the people that was expressed in Act 1002 and decided to mandate masks for our kids. And so I'm really here today to try to understand where the disconnect is, because I feel like we're not really using science-based data to make some of these decisions. I think there are a lot of important questions that we need to really answer before we implement a school-wide masking decree. Questions such as, where is the scientific research on the safety and effectiveness of healthy children wearing face masks for prolonged periods of time? What are the short and long-term effects? Are face masks effective at reducing the spread of viral infections? Today we hear from many who reference the CDC or the ADA as experts that are telling us that we must mask up. But what randomized controlled studies are they referencing when they are making these recommendations? Because I can't find them online. Because this very idea of masking against airborne viruses is not a new one. It has been studied for years. And that is why we have never masked up during cold and flu season. In fact, before the big media push for universal masking, the CDC as late as May of 2020 was citing 10 randomized controlled trials that showed no significant reduction in influenza transmission with the use of face masks. Even Dr. Fauci as late as May 2020 claimed on 60 Minutes that there is no reason to be walking around with a mask. He went on to explain that masks can only block large droplets. They give a false sense of security, and they cause people to get more germs on their hands by fiddling with them. And I just think that these facts do not change over time. So what I'm asking today is that we start having a more honest and open discussion about the science behind the masks and the policies that we're implementing, because it just appears that it's become super political. If past studies have shown that masks don't work, what has changed? What randomized clinical trials, what has been introduced to us by the experts that say masks suddenly work? What specific RCTs can this board point to that shows us that masks work in a manner that is statistically significant, that we should cover our children's faces at school? We've had now over a year to look at this. I know there is one real-time example that was done in Florida where they had 40 districts that wore masks, 27 that did not wear masks, and there was no statistical difference in school cases per enrolled student in person. So I'm just trying to understand, what is the science that we're using? What does the data say for masking kids? That we just need to get to that. And again, it's all for the kids. We want to make sure that they are having a great experience at school and learning, and I think masks are getting in the way.
Thank you, Kristen. Alicia Ellich. Alicia Ellich. Oh, Alicia Ellich.
Hi, my name's Alicia Ellich. I've got 2 children that attend Fayetteville Public Schools. My experience has actually been really good with Fayetteville Public Schools until this school year. I've had 2 issues, so I'm going to try to go through them as quick as I can, but both of them are very, very important. First one, I'm a single mom. I have to work. I am not home whenever my children get home off of the school bus. So saying that, the school bus drops them off. They have to walk back to my house, which is, a decent distance. So last Friday, there was an incident where my youngest, which is in middle school, first year riding the bus home, was supposed to have been home at 3:30. She normally would text me and tell me that she is home. I got no text message. I work in the medical field. I'm in and out of patients' rooms and everything. I thought she forgot to turn on her cell phone. She'll end up texting me here in a few minutes. Went in to see my next patient, came back out, and did not have a text. Tried calling her, went straight to voicemail. So at this point, Mom is getting a little concerned. About 4:45 is normally whenever my junior high kid gets home. She texts me while I'm in the room with the patient and says, I am home. Sister is not here. Where is she at? I am totally freaking out. I mean, I'm at work shaking because I don't know where my child is at. Nobody has contacted me. To my knowledge, my child got picked up between the time that the bus dropped her off and the time that she made it home. No mother should have to go through that. Come to find out, there was a bus accident. Fayetteville Public Schools, nobody contacted me. The school did not. The bus park did not contact me. I thought my kid was kidnapped. I run out of my work, jump in the car. I'm on my way home, fixing to call the police whenever my child calls me and tells me that the bus was in an accident. So at that point, I knew she was okay. However, I should not have been finding that out from my 10-year-old child. I should have been finding that out from Fayetteville Public Schools. You guys send out automated calls and text messages whenever there are issues where school buses are not going to be able to run because of snow and ice. And some routes are running, some are not. Why can you not send out a mass text to all of Fayetteville Public Schools saying that Route V was in a minor accident? All children are okay, but they will be delayed getting home. Why does the bus barn not have a list of what students are on what buses? They didn't even know my child was on the bus. They told me that they don't know what children are on their buses, that the schools have not provided that information to them. But at the same time, the schools say that the bus barn is responsible for pulling up that information. They should have access to all of that. So I don't want to place blame. I don't know whose fault it is. However, there needs to be some kind of solution so that no other parents have to go through what I went through. Because I was terrified. Like I said, I was fixing to call the police because I thought my child had been kidnapped. The other issue that I ran into is my other child. She has an anxiety disorder. I took her to the doctor. She got a note from the doctor where if her anxiety is heightened, she should be allowed to remove her mask until her anxiety level goes back down, and then she would put it back on. I send that to the school principal, and the school principal emails me back and says that she will have to continue wearing a mask in class, that is not acceptable, and that they need documented notes from the doctor, the letter saying that she has an anxiety disorder and that she should be able to take it off was not enough. So I email the principal back and I tell them that my child has a 504, that her notes regarding her anxiety disorder is even in that 504. Well, they magically find them and tell me that actually it wasn't in the 504,
but they are placing it in with the 504. At this point, I still don't have the issue resolved. I turned this in last Tuesday. And here we are, over a week later, they're telling me that I need to schedule a Zoom meeting to work this out. Also, the school policy, if you actually look at it, says students may be exempt from this policy by the school principal due to documented medical condition of the student. Apparently, the principal cannot actually approve it. She told me that she would have to send my child's documentation off to the district person so that the district person could make a decision. I don't know who this district person is, but the school policy says the principal can make that decision. So just so you guys know, the schools are not following the mask exemption policy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I need to cut you off just because that's what we're doing with everybody here, but I do feel like some of these comments can be directly addressed, and so we will definitely have Dr. Colbert get in touch with you with regard to these specific concerns. Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, our next speaker is Rich Klein.
Nika, Tim. My name is Rich Klein. I'm a father of 3 Fayetteville High School graduates, currently 1 in 8th grade. My title today is In God We Trust, All Others Bring Data. My objective is to ask the board that you review your mask mandate policy and to replace it with parental choice. Why? I listened to the last 2 board meetings twice, actually one of them 3 times, and I'm really seeking to understand why, what was the rationale for the mask mandate. And it was clear, it was the superintendent's recommendation, the board's resolution on 7/28, which is to follow the CDC guidelines and recommendations, the Department of Health, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Department of Education. And there was also a nice endorsement of local pediatricians. But there was no data, no facts. It was just, this is why we want to do this. No information that was making it very clear that there would be a reduction of hospitalizations, a reduction of deaths, no information, no facts. So I started digging. That's the kind of guy I am. I went into the CDC website. I go, there's got to be some good things in here. I'm looking for facts. Nothing. There was some buried deep in the CDC guidelines. There was some what they call observational. A hairstylist had a mask on. She had COVID. 138 people got their hair cut. No one got COVID. That's nice study, but that's not really that compelling. So I looked at the WHO. There's very, very little out here showing this, of why we need to be doing this. And I have done continued my own research. I did learn that if you're going to do this, you really need to have N95s. N95s seem to be the most effective, and something else called FFP3, which is also highly effective, but they are very uncomfortable and they need to be worn perfectly. I learned that all the other masks, standard masks, do not work. They're not effective. And anything regarding the density, the people in the room, the hours that people spend together, the dimensions, the draft, if there's not any one of these things happens, the masks don't work. So it dawned on me, though, after watching this twice, that actually you do, I was impressed, and I think I finally understood why you did it. We do want to keep the kids in school. But I felt it was intellectually dishonest in that now when one kid has COVID, doesn't know he has it, goes to school with another kid, as long as they both have masks, we don't have to shut down the schools, both don't have to be quarantined. Isn't that great? The fact of the matter is the masks really aren't working, and I just felt that it's dishonest for us to wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We can, keep, isn't this great? We can keep in school. I want to stay in school. I really do think that you all want the kids to stay in school, but I think we can do that with parental choice And I think that, this is one of my son, it's his best year yet. He loves his teachers. He loves staying in school. But I think with parental choice, parental discretion, we can get to the same place. We can stay in school. And if you're sick, keep your kid home. Get tested. And if you're going to wear a mask, we've got to wear N95s. That's all I have to say. And great to you guys. Thank you.
Rock, Florida. Rock, Florida. No. Okay. Katie Kirk.
I'm Katie Kirk, and thank you for listening to the parents. I have 3 children in the Fayetteville schools. We are very, very thankful for many, many things. We love our schools, we love our teachers, and I appreciate all the work and stress and sweat you guys have put into the school year. I'm coming here with some questions, really, for you. I know you can't actually answer the questions, but these are questions based on common sense and intellectual integrity, and that is over the masks. If you are requiring masks for children in the classroom or any indoor space, why are you not requiring masks for the kids doing sports on school grounds? Now, according to the science, and I am an exercise physiologist, so I do have schooling in this, but it's also common sense. When kids are playing sports, their respiratory rate is higher. When the respiratory rate is higher, they're taking in more air. Therefore, they're taking in more droplets. Also, the common sense of them playing sports, and I'm going to specifically reference wrestling, basketball, volleyball, which take place indoors, but also football, which takes place outdoors. They are in close proximity, literally tackling each other, smushing themselves together, slamming bodies, and they're in the same respiratory space, so taking in the same air. So if for the parents on the one side who want the masks and feel more safety, and your claim is that you're keeping the kids safe by having the masks on, when they go to their sport on school grounds, you are no longer keeping them safe. Therefore, you are creating a false sense of security and hypocrisy for what is safety that you claim. But for the parents on the other side who don't want the masks, there's hypocrisy toward their freedom or their time with their mask off. So which is it? Why are we not doing anything with sports? And I feel like when it comes to sports, we also close our eyes and turn our face because, it's sports, right? But if a kid gives another kid COVID who was playing, because they were playing sports, a kid that was not in their classroom, then what is I don't understand what is going on here, because we're trying to keep kids in the same classroom. They eat, they go to recess, same class, mask on. But then they cross wires with other kids in the sports. So you're not actually protecting yourself, and then that creates possibly more legality on your end, right? So also, if you're doing this freedom of masks with high respiratory rate while playing sports, why are you not doing this for PE? Kids have to wear masks while their respiratory rate is up during PE, unless I'm mistaken. As far as I'm told, as far as my kids are saying, the mask is on. Is PE not the same physicality of a sport, whether they're playing an actual sport or doing a physical activity? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back and see if some of these other people have shown up that weren't here in the beginning. Is Russell Ritchie here yet? Or April, Florida? April or Rock, Florida? Nope. Melissa Ahrens? Nope. Or Brian Parker? No? Okay. And then we have one more comment that was sent in that is Alan's going to read for us. Statement.
Okay. I want to thank FPS for having the courage and initiative to put children's safety first this school year. As a parent, I appreciate the thought that went into making the mask a requirement for the 2021-22 school year. I am a former RN for the district, and I can say without hesitation that this district truly wants the best for each child that attends FPS. The nurses of this district worked tirelessly last year to keep all students, their families, and staff safe. I was the nurse at Vandergrift Elementary last year. It is one of the larger schools in the district. I was extremely strict with my students and staff last year to wear masks. I know this made some parents upset, but that was okay because along with my teachers and administration at my school, we kept our COVID numbers low. I did not have one child who quarantined as a close contact come back as positive. I know that this is because we, as a school, were so strict with wearing our masks. People are saying how COVID doesn't make kids as sick. The Delta variant has changed that. Some will argue that statistically there are fewer kids that go into the hospital than adults. This may be true, but I would have you look at the number of positive cases at Arkansas Children's Hospital that are on ventilators due to COVID pneumonia. Statistically, I would say that we would never have a child in our district have a stroke or drown, but we did. I believe those statistics to be lower than the statistics we have today of a child testing positive and going on a ventilator. The truth is that any inconvenience we have is worth keeping one child safe. Ann Hornberger, a registered nurse, the inpatient educator at Washington Regional Medical Center.
Yeah.
I believe that's all of the citizen
Yes,
participation
that's
we have.
all of our citizen participation, and I just wanted to invite you all to stay for the rest of our meeting, but I did want to make sure you knew that the masks are actually not a part of our agenda tonight, so we won't be addressing that. But I did want to point out that the way that our policy is written, it will be reviewed at some point between now and our regular meeting in October. At this point, the situation has not changed in Washington County from when we enacted the policy, so it's not yet time for us to reconsider it. We are following the guidance we're being given from the Department of Ed, from the ADH, from a variety of sources. None of us are scientists. None of us are doctors. We are reliant on the professionals to guide this policy. But we will at some point revisit this sometime between now and our October meeting. With regard to those of you who came and spoke to curriculum, we actually do have an agenda item on curriculum tonight, and that is a discussion by Dr. Weaver about the curriculum review cycle and how we actually go about that in the school district. So if you do have an interest in curriculum, you may be interested in staying for our meeting. But otherwise, that concludes the citizen participation portion. And again, I just thank everyone who took the time to come. It's always a pleasure to have people at our meetings. So thank you very much. And we do not, Dr. Colbert, have any board member liaison reports, but I would like to let board members know that Dr. Colbert was nominated for Superintendent of the Year. I don't know. It has a green light.
Can we hold it 1 minute, let the crowd go, and then we'll...
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Is my...
Appreciate
you. I don't know. I mean, it looks like it's on.
Lean on in.
It back on. Make it.
Oh.
Make it. Make it. I know, but what I'm saying, we can't close the door. Nika's, we can't hit her.
Okay.
For some reason, hers is not coming through.
Could you hear me back there? Oh, she can.
You're on.
Okay. Maybe, is it just me?
You were set.
Okay. Do you all want to take a break, or do you want to just?
No. We'll close those doors. They're just going to stand out there.
Yeah, I think we're okay to continue.
Yeah. But I did want to tell you all that Dr. Colbert was nominated as Superintendent of the Year. He told me today that he was not selected as Superintendent of the Year, but it's quite an honor to be nominated. And of course, we're super proud of you. You're our Superintendent of the Year.
I appreciate that.
Very grateful for your work. So with that, nobody else has anything on the board member front, so you go ahead and take it over.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President, and to the board members and to the parents and teachers and supporters. I do just have a few things to mention. One is that we have completed 9 days of school successfully, and I don't know, I would invite you all to talk to some of the teachers and kids that things have gone very well, and I appreciate the hard work that the teachers have put in, and also the students. I tell you, this is amazing when I walk into the rooms and the buildings and see the kids engaged and doing very well, even with the mask on. And so I'm real appreciative of the fact that the parents and the students have really helped us to make sure that we have returned back to almost a normal situation, but we're getting there. So we do thank everyone for their hard work. Some of the teachers out here, thank you all for what you have done. Appreciate you. If you've driven by some of the schools, I would let you know that we got a lot of construction still going on. I need to send out some good kudos to Dr. Duncan and her team for a job well done. I must say that I was in some of the buildings Friday before the beginning of school, and the superintendent was kind of nervous. And so I wanted to call Dr. Duncan and say, oh, are we going to be ready? And I want you to know that crew went in Friday night and Saturday night, and we were able to open all of the schools without any problems whatsoever. So again, kudos to her team for a job well done, for them to go ahead and make sure that, the schools was open. And plus, with construction, we have to make sure the safety was a big issue, and they took care of that. So I was real pleased. But as you continue to look at the construction itself, right now, of course, with Washington and with Leverett, hopefully by the latter part of October or 1st of November, we may have elevators in those buildings. And so therefore, the reason why we're going to be able to do that, that means every kid will be able to go to his or her home school without being transferred to another school. So I'm real proud of that. So we're looking forward to the completion of those elevators in those buildings. So again, thank you, board members, for allowing us to do that. And then also the painting and all that. The buildings just feel so calm and welcome them to the parents and students as they come in. And so that looks great too. So we're going to try to do a photograph type program for you guys so you can see some of that work. So especially for the parents, and most of them cannot go into the building. We would really like to show that. But as we come to staff members, we have all the certified staff members on board. But I want you to know that one of the big areas that we're working on is bus drivers. We are short, and so if anyone would like to become a bus driver, we have positions open, and we encourage them to let us know. We'll be glad to let them to come and help us out. It is something that we have to continue to look at because, as you know, the top priority is that we must get the kids home. And so, but at the same time, we use buses to take the athletic teams to the different games, especially those away from the district. So therefore, in order for us to make sure that we continue to do that, we have to make sure we have enough bus drivers. So I'm asking any citizen out there, if you'd like to do that, because you can do it, actually stay on your regular job and come and drive that morning and finish up about 8 o'clock, and then go and work and come back and be with us and pick them up and take them home about 2:45 and 3 o'clock back home. So that it is doable. And then the other area that we have that we're still working on is substitutes. Last year, I appreciate the board allowing us to go ahead and hire those additional substitutes so that they could be in the buildings if we did have teachers not there. But right now, because of the additional needs of teachers and all, some of those substitutes who were real good, who were certified, they have gotten a job, so therefore we are kind of short there. So that's another area that we're asking anyone who's like to come and be with us. I'm sure HR would welcome you with open arms and try to get you signed up to be substitute to help us out just in case we need those if a teacher is out for some reason, sick or whatever. But otherwise, things are going well. We've been real pleased with the beginning, and so we want to let everyone know that, yes, we want to make sure that we keep the doors open, because I do have calls and emails from parents that says, please, whatever you do, try to make sure you keep the kids safe and also keep teachers safe and healthy so that they can stay and be able to teach other kids. So that is a top priority because we know that it's a need. In order to do that, we must work together as a team in order to make sure that our schools are open so kids will be able to come and that we can accommodate that with parents and all, because they really say, hey, I really need for my child to be in school. And we believe that too, because as we look at the data and all, that we feel that the best way to continue to educate other kids is make sure that they're there with the teachers receiving a quality education. So we're doing it, and we appreciate all the support from everyone, teachers, parents, and all, that we can continue to provide a quality education for all students in the Fayetteville Public School system. So thank you, Madam President.
Okay, we have a consent agenda before us. I don't know if anyone has anything in there that you would like to pull out, but if not, I will accept a motion for approval of those items.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any more comment from the board on those items? Nope. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Consent agenda passes 7-0. Okay, and now we have a presentation from Dr. Weber with regard to the curriculum review cycle.
Good evening. Ms. Parker, can you help me get into this section? Or I'm going to play a short video clip first that is an overview of the Science Task Force, which was one of our most recent board-approved curriculum review cycle programs. So we do a program review, and following the video, I'll outline the steps that we take for each subject area. Please join me by watching on the screens. One of the important skills for a school district is to identify what should every student know and be able to do. Fayetteville Public Schools has a curriculum review cycle. That cycle identifies content areas such as English language arts, math, science, and social studies. As the program is reviewed, teacher leaders will identify the strengths, weaknesses, and barriers to teaching and learning. The goal of any school district is to have those key skills and concepts identified so first-year teachers and veteran teachers have a common understanding of where to begin. So we begin with the end in mind, which is high school graduation, and we backwards map the key skills and key concepts down to pre-K. We really value investing in teacher leaders, and our board has put this as a priority, curriculum design for the future. And as standards are developed by state and national organizations, Fayetteville Public Schools will have a curriculum review cycle in place that supports future standards. The strength of the Fayetteville Public Schools curriculum is that it's developed by Fayetteville Public School teachers for Fayetteville Public School teachers.
So I do feel it's a very important responsibility, but I do think it's important to have a teacher voice on the task force. And that's another thing that I think is very innovative about Fayetteville Public Schools is that they are entrusting the teachers, those who are delivering the curriculum, to write this and give them an opportunity to not just have a voice, but be a part of every step in the process.
Grammarly does more than catch errors.
The district's curriculum review process has made possible a standards-based curriculum that is rigorous, relevant, and aligned across our schools. We have 16 campuses. We have 9 elementary schools. There's been a lot of discussion in our community over the past 12 months regarding the district's curriculum and asking, what is the process for developing curriculum? This evening, I will share the district's process. It is important to note that the district has representation on the task force from all 16 schools, including pre-K. Teachers have the opportunity to align their work to the state standards. We start with the state standards before we develop local curriculum. The task force allows teachers to become deeply familiar with state standards at their grade level, as well as across grade levels. This system and this process allows our teachers to teach for deep understanding, because they have the opportunity to communicate with teachers from grade levels both above and below. When a district like Fayetteville commits to investing in a curriculum review process, it allows teachers to identify the current strengths of the program, much like a business would say, what are our current strengths? Share existing barriers for students and for teachers. Review common student misunderstandings and make corrections so we don't make the same mistakes or maybe front load material the next semester. And finally, make recommendations for revising the district's curriculum once again with alignment to the state's expectations for each grade level and course. Fayetteville Public Schools maintains a long-range curriculum revision plan which closely follows a prescribed cycle. During the review of existing programs, teachers and administrators focused on alignment to state standards and the goals of the school district. In 2017, I had the privilege of working with approximately 50 pre-K through high school math teachers. This was our first board-approved curriculum review cycle. We had curriculum long before that. The district's been around for 150 years, but this was our first time under my leadership to have a team of teachers come together and review a program. So we looked at the strengths, weaknesses, and areas for growth. We also looked at potential threats to student understanding. Since 2017, we have done this same process with K-6 music, science, guidance counselors, library and media specialists from all of our schools, English language arts, and world languages. This past year, due to the pandemic and due to school closings and interruptions to schooling over the past year and a half, we put a delay to 2 subject areas. So we had planned on developing and revising curriculum for PE and health educators, and secondly, for social studies teachers in K-12. And those were both put on hold. This summer, we found out that the Arkansas Department of Education had to also delay the standards development and revision for K-12 social studies. So due to the delay of the standards coming out and possible changes in the course offerings at the high school level, we delayed the social studies task force for 1 more year. So it is our goal to have a PE and health task force during the 2021-22 school year, and next year have the social studies task force along with some others, which will put us back on track with our board approved curriculum review cycle. This is outlined on our district website, so taxpayers and parents and students can see exactly what the process is and how long it will take before we get back to mathematics for our next review cycle of that program. All during this time, I don't want people to think, well, it's 5 or 6 years before they get back to math and English language arts. All during this time, we have people such as a director of English language arts, a director of K-12 science, and a director of English language or mathematics. These directors work with our classroom teachers. Our executive directors meet with our principals. So if there's something not working in the curriculum mid-year, we can make corrections. We don't have to wait 5 years from now to revise the curriculum. On the screen are the 4 stages that we follow in Fayetteville Public Schools. We've followed this with every subject area that I mentioned. Stage 1, we determine the program goals. We do that both by what are the needs of the teachers and the students, but we also look at the National Councils of Teachers of English. We could look at National Council of Teachers of Mathematics and so on. So we look at our national organizations and what they're recommending and what best practices and research are for each content area for K-12 instruction. Second stage, we unpack the standards. That might not make sense to a lot of non-educators, but when we unpack the standards, we basically look at the verbs, we look at the key skills and the key concepts that the state of Arkansas says a 3rd grader must know and be able to do in order to be ready for the next grade level. So when we unpack the standards, that helps inform us for curriculum alignment. And as you can imagine, in a school district with 10,000 plus students, If you don't have good curriculum alignment, the students receive a disjointed curriculum, and our taxpayers deserve better than that. Third, we have a curriculum design in alignment with the state standards, as I've mentioned already. And fourth and finally, we review and recommend materials. So this could come in the form of textbooks. We're starting to see less and less textbooks because of technology. Things are moving to Chromebooks, or things are moving to hands-on learning, project-based learning. Materials. So this could be textbook, this could also be materials, this could be novels, but there are a lot of different things that come into how do you align the materials to the local curriculum, which is, of course, aligned to the state standards. The curriculum is not static. If teachers see that a component or unit is not meeting the students' needs, we can reconvene across schools and have a representative from every fourth grade come and speak to the needs of the fourth graders. This is an example of our district's curriculum for mathematics. And all of this is available on the board docs for the community or anyone watching out online. So this is available for the public to view and see these different artifacts and this presentation tonight. What we have before you are standards, essential skills, I can statements, key vocabulary, resources, and summative assessments. That might not make sense to everyone. We also have the name of each unit, and that may make more sense to parents. So the name of the unit, the pacing, 5 to 7 days, for example, and then these are examples of what is embedded in the curriculum. So this is called fourth grade year at a glance. So we hire a first-year teacher, and they can see before they ever start their first day of teaching where they're going. Where am I? Where am I going? And a curriculum guide says, how will I get there? In closing, we trust our system. We've led this through several review cycles with several content areas. We're proud of our teachers. Our classroom teachers are coming together and they're developing this curriculum, and then we're implementing it and monitoring the implementation. Each course is aligned with the state standards, and our partnership includes the State Department of Education, the University of Arkansas professors, the co-op, national education consultants, state and national organizations like I've mentioned, and other regional partners who provide our students with a high-quality education that our community can be proud of. Fayetteville Public Schools has been recognized by the Secretary of Education for the board-approved curriculum review cycle and has been invited to present at state and regional conferences to share with other school districts across the state how we develop curriculum, adopt materials, and align our work with the state standards for each course. I'd like to thank Ms. Waitsman and the board for inviting me to just go over and review our district's board-approved curriculum review cycle, and I'll be happy to take questions about the process.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Certainly.
Can you talk a little bit about how we guide or instruct our teachers to address, especially at the high school level, maybe more controversial topics or kind of current hot button topics?
Certainly. This has come up more, as you can imagine, over the past 12 months. We've all been watching the events that have taken place in our world, and some teachers have been reluctant to teach certain topics. So I receive complaints from parents sometimes saying, why is my child not getting this, but all the other teachers are teaching it? With current events, it can be challenging. We don't necessarily want a math teacher spending 3 days on something related to terrorism. That sounds like something more in a social studies class. You also have to ask yourself what's age appropriate. So is it appropriate for a third grader to be talking about terrorists and murder? Probably not. We also have created a guide, and this guide was reviewed with our teachers last year, but to start the school year off again this year, every principal had a back-to-school training to go over this guide that talks about how to teach current events and controversial issues. One of the main things we'd like teachers to do is check your emotions. When I was a teacher, you didn't have your phone. They didn't have the phone. I mean, you might have had a classroom phone, but you didn't have a cell phone. So you weren't able to get the current events and the news straight to your phone during your lunch break. You almost had to wait till you got home to find out what's going on in the news. So all of our teachers and several of our students can get those updates, and even a ninth grader can come into class and say, "Did you see what just popped up on my phone? I want to talk about this." Teachers need to check their emotions so they can come from a neutral perspective and not be preachy or not talk about too much their politics or their views. Address controversial topics as impartially and objectively as possible. Do not allow your biases or personal beliefs to interfere with professional judgment. Another thing we want to keep in mind is that kids within the same classroom are going to have different views because we live in a diverse society. So we don't want a student to go to this corner of the room if they vote one way on a topic or a current event, and the rest of the class to go this way. And now we've just placed one student on this side of the room. So we have to prepare a balanced presentation, but we also have, if we're going to ask essential questions or broad topics, we have to allow for a balanced presentation from the students. So we can't give the student a lower grade if it doesn't agree with our philosophical belief. That would just be professionally unprofessional. We'd like them to challenge students intellectually, but not challenge students' beliefs. Students can challenge each other, but an adult or a professional in the room should be a facilitator and should not be challenging students' beliefs. And we have provided guidelines from national organizations, including short videos and instructional strategies that can help teachers through these difficult times. But the guidelines for teaching current events and controversial issues allow teachers to teach current events and controversial issues. If it's age appropriate, it also needs to be aligned to the standards. We don't need to, as I mentioned, have a PE teacher or a math teacher spending a lot of time on something that's more of a social studies topic. Teachers are human, and they're not immune to human reactions or human emotion. So we have to ask our teachers to be very careful. They may have a lived experience that makes it harder for them to talk about a certain topic or a current event in real time the week of. And we've told our teachers that sometimes real time's not the best time to talk about it. We live in this world of social media, Instagram, Facebook, where everything's real time. But sometimes we need to allow things to play out. The day or the moment it happens might not be the best time to have the conversation. So we have provided instructional strategies, we've provided guidelines, and most importantly, we've asked that our teachers use sensitivity. And when we have parents that have a concern or a student says, "My teacher crossed the line," we talk with those teachers. Either the principal or a supervisor talks with the teachers, and sometimes it's a whole grade level team. But we've had a few of those incidents come up over the past 12 months because we've had a lot more going on in the world. And we feel like when it comes up, we take it very seriously because we are teaching other people's children, and it's not on us to teach those beliefs or to teach an ideology or to force students to believe a certain political or religious belief. So there's a lot of areas there where teachers have professional judgment, but we've provided guidelines because we feel like it's getting more and more difficult sometimes for teachers to decide, should I teach this, or is this age appropriate, or encourage in a public school system with these guidelines.
Thank you so much.
Maybe this is more of a Ellis question, probably more of a statement, but I just know over the number of years that we've been doing we've had regular updates with you, Dr. Weber, up here on the curriculum review cycle. We've had the math teachers in, we've had the English teachers, but probably some of the more interesting groups to be in here were the music education. I remember that one in particular, the library and media, world languages, those ones that may not have been so front and center to within a process like this. And I particularly remember the library one coming up with, they really worked through a number of issues, and that was one of the more beneficial presentations and discussions, and probably the feedback that I heard was from those. So kind of have high hopes for the health and physical education. It's too bad that social studies is delayed again, waiting for the standards, but it's good to get that back on track, and interest is piqued on that subject, because that would be interesting to hear what they have to say coming together for a year and working through that together. So I know that's been anticipated for quite some time.
Thank you, Mr. Eichmann. As I was preparing for this tonight for the presentation, I was going through old slides and old pictures, and I came across the pictures of several teachers who have retired, and it makes me sad. But it also makes me happy that I work in a school district that allows me to lead the board-approved curriculum review cycle, because when I see those pictures of 30, 32-year veterans who are now happily retired, and they deserve their retirement years, I can look and see before they retired, they invested in the science curriculum and the math curriculum and the English language arts curriculum. So excellent teachers from each of those subject areas are no longer with us. And without such a process, they leave, and maybe the classroom teacher that gets their classroom gets some old files or something off of the Google Drive from their classroom, but the rest of the district misses out on 30 years of experience. And I'm talking multiple teachers who worked for us for 30 years, and when they retire, we get some of their best resources and lessons, and also their alignment to how they approach these issues. And a first-year teacher comes into our district and benefits. So it's a very valuable process to look back at the people that we've lost due to retirement and also see that they paid it forward to the Fayetteville Public Schools, not only by their years of experience, but by they left in these documents.
I wanted to say two things about my favorite things about the curriculum review cycle. One of them is that it is uniform across the district. We have lots of kids in the district, and this is something we've really emphasized in previous presentations about this. We have a highly mobile population, and it's very tough for kids to switch schools. It's tough for them emotionally. We know how much they connect to their peers and their teachers, and just dealing with the kind of chaos that some kids have in their lives. And the educational disruption, I feel like we've really been able through this process to help solve for that because of the sequencing that's common at all of our elementary schools. If you're at Happy Hollow for September and by November you're at Leverett, you're not repeating material, you haven't missed material, it's all kind of happening in that same sequence. And I just love the way that involves taking care of everybody. The other thing that I've been a first year teacher, and I just want to say what gold that 30-year veterans materials are. It's very stressful and just a ton of work and adjustment to be new in a classroom and allowing teachers to have sequencing and units. And I mean, when you click through these documents, there's just a wealth of resource there. And that support for first-year teachers is just invaluable. Lets them take care of themselves better, lets them take care of kids better. There's a lot to juggle in that role, and I really appreciate the support for them.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley.
And we've had some administrative changes too, some new positions in place since the last time we went through this. So it'll be interesting to see how those roles will be impacted or how those individuals will impact the next curriculum review that we go through. Do you anticipate that they'll play an active role in that process?
Yes, very much so. We have specialists in the math, English language arts, and science departments, and those specialists they were already on staff, but we've changed their role, so now they are directors. And as directors, they can very much work with professional development. Leslie Merritt is our new director of science. She's already working with elementary science teachers to align what they do to help with alignment between what they're doing in ELA and math. She's working with middle school teachers on professional development. So we didn't really have that point of contact to implement the content areas. And now that we have that, that's their full-time job, is to focus on responding to the needs. We had a lot of help from our two executive directors who are in the room tonight, but they're not content specialists at every subject area. So they did a great job of getting us to this point, but we were really at a level where we needed to hire some directors for content specific. And so we are really proud of the work that they're doing. And when we get through the next task force, they'll very much be instrumental. They may even be leading it without me. But we feel like these documents are a foundation, and it's a focus on continuous improvement. I think Ms. Hurley alluded to it. It doesn't matter what side of town you live in. If you're in the third grade, this is what you should be guaranteed. So when educators speak, they call it a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Fayetteville Public Schools should be able to guarantee that if you're at Asbel or Owl Creek or Vandergrift, this is what a third grader gets. This is This is our guarantee to you, the customer, or to your family. And so without this document, it's hard to guarantee it across schools. Every teacher closes their door and teaches whatever they want. But with a document, principals can monitor instruction, and teacher teams can also spend more of their time on planning the lessons rather than trying to read the state standards and unpack. A lot of the state standards and the resources have already been unpacked in these documents. So we call it a professional learning community, but when the fourth grade team comes together to meet, a lot of the meat and potatoes is already there, and they can do their work.
And that's what, as I reflect back on 2015 or 16, when we first started this conversation about curriculum review and developing that cycle, that was the original concern we had, was that there was some kind of inconsistency across the district, specifically at the lower grades. Obviously, we only have one high school, so there's consistency there. But yeah, so I think that's one of the best outgrowths of that we have third grade teachers with the same, obviously they've had the same standards, but now they're operating off of the same materials across schools. So I think that's a huge step forward. And it's good to reflect on where this process started and see how much progress we've made.
Dr. Weaver, I think sometimes there's confusion about the board's role in curriculum. And could you talk a little bit about what we do, what our role is from your perspective?
Due to the mask, I didn't understand the whole
So I think
question.
sometimes there's confusion about what the board's role is, or uncertainty about what the board's role is in curriculum development and choice. Could you speak a little bit to what our role is from your perspective?
Thank you. The board's role in curriculum design is the question. I'm charged as the associate superintendent for teaching and learning to facilitate this work. Now, in some school districts, maybe smaller districts, they'd have someone who works in the central office and writes or types curriculum. That's one way to do it. One person does it, and that's more of a top-down approach. Our approach is more democratic. We allow teacher representatives who are nominated by their principal from every school to come together, and it's multiple meetings. It's not just a 2 or 3 day meeting in the summertime. So they come together and they work, and then once they develop that curriculum, and we do work with University of Arkansas professors or co-ops education specialists that work in our region, and we also work with the State Department of Education and ask people to edit and give us feedback on what's missing, or do we have alignment with our standards. Once we do that, then as associate superintendent, I bring this to the board for a first reading and for a second approval or denial of the document. And they're not specialists. The board members don't necessarily say, hey, you missed something here in 5th grade math. It's not like that. But if there were something controversial or there were something in there, they would ask me. They would say, do we really need this in the document? Or is this something that we need in here? So there is accountability that the board has to me as associate superintendent, and I have to them rather, to deliver a quality product that is aligned to the state standards that will support student understanding. And eventually, we hope 100% graduation. That's always our goal, is to reach all kids to the finish line and prepare them for life. Another goal is to prepare every learner for the next grade level. So if they're in 1st grade, make sure they're ready for 2nd grade. So the board's role in this is advisory, and they definitely ask me questions quite often. They ask me when I'm giving presentations about different areas of the curriculum or about different programs. One example that's not really that controversial in Fayetteville is bike education. The board has asked me recently, what are we going to do with bike education? And the answer is, when we have the Health and PE Task Force, we're going to revisit those goals, and we're going to revisit what does bike education look like. What does it look like in elementary school? How is it different in middle school? How is it more rigorous? How many weeks, or what's the pacing guide for bike education? And more importantly in PE than just riding a bike or playing a game is, what skills are you learning? So what key skills are we teaching, and how do those skills grow as a child gets older? So bike education is one thing we'll talk about this year. As you can imagine, English language arts, science, and social studies have other things that may be considered a little more controversial, but we feel pretty solid with our curriculum because it is aligned to the state standards. If a parent or community member has a question, I encourage them to ask me. I love meeting with parents and families and going over the curriculum. They can also meet with their child's teacher or with the building principal. Sometimes we see things on Facebook about how the curriculum stinks or the curriculum hurts kids, and that hurts me. We don't wake up in the morning trying to hurt kids intentionally. So if there's something that's wrong in the curriculum, we have processes in place where we can have a professional conversation, a give and take, and we definitely want to listen to the parents' concern because they're sending their child to our school, and we want to do our best to prepare them for the next level.
Love to hear that bike education will be a focus of the PE.
I want to be on that task force.
FYI.
That was your cue.
You're right. But my question is more sort of maybe a reflection on what have we learned over the last few years of doing this. You know, we've been through a few cycles of facilitating the process and implementation, and just curious if you could reflect on that as we've sort of had this time to pause without it, but has been much of a pause. But just curious if you have any reflections you'd like to share.
3 reflections that come to mind immediately, Mr. Smith, are teacher voice matters. If you want to know what's going on in the classroom, ask a teacher. I could sit in my office and write a social studies curriculum or a science curriculum, but I don't know K through 12. And it's been a long time since I've been in that chair. So ask a teacher. Teacher's voice matters. The second thing I would say is that every system has gaps. You're in banking, other people in here work in other lines of work. Every system and every organization has gaps. So in order to identify the gaps, we have to have some sort of a meeting, and it's very rare that K-12 teachers get together across buildings. That's very rare in any district in Arkansas. So by creating a mechanism for districts' teachers to communicate, we can ask them, where are the gaps? What's not working? And hopefully we can close those gaps in the system so that doesn't negatively impact student understanding. And the third thing I would say, when you have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, the research proves that has an impact on deep student understanding. I mean, we're not teaching kids activities and lessons just to check for compliance that we taught the lesson. There's actually transfer skills that employers are wanting when kids graduate from a school district like Fayetteville. And we hope that we're teaching towards those transfer skills, and we're not just waiting until the ACT Aspire comes out at the end of the year for an annual exam, but that throughout the year, common formative assessments are helping us measure those learning targets and whether or not students are transferring those skills. So those would be the 3 big takeaways that I've had over the past 5 years.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Dr. Weaver? That was very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I guess that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Next, we have Glenda Solons with the final budget of expenditures for us.
Here it is. Let's see. Is there a way to make it? I guess that's it. There you go. All right. Good evening. You may recall that back in May that we had a meeting, a workshop, where we went through this budget and covered most of the details. Tonight I'm going to present the final report for fiscal year 21, and I'll just touch on some of the variances if that pleases the board. If you remember about this time last year, there were a lot of uncertainties. We didn't know if tax payments would be priorities in people's households, so we budgeted this very conservatively at 92%. The collection actually came in at real close to 99%. And so that is that difference there. Moving down to the next variance, which is ELA. That's based on participation. We don't usually know that number till about the third quarter of the year. And so that is the reason for that variance of that 117% collection. And then special ed catastrophic. That is based on identified expenditures. Ann Woodbury, I'll say her name proudly because she does a great job at identifying those expenditures, sending that report into the state so that we get reimbursed for those. It's a pool of money that the state has, and they divvy it out based on the number of people who send in expenditure claims. And so we got quite a bit on that, quite a bit more than what we anticipated getting. Any questions on the state and local at all?
Love all those numbers above 100, Glenda. That's all those numbers above 100. It's really remarkable.
Well, we were very,
well
very
done.
conservative at this
Yeah,
time last
yeah,
year.
it's
We were
awesome.
a little nervous.
Yeah, understandably. It looks great.
Are we going to have a clawback on the local collection rate?
Yes.
Yeah, we will.
If you'll notice that on the state foundation funding, that it was lowered by what we expected to get, and that's because we came in higher than that 98%.
Okay. Gotcha.
Exactly. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the expenditures. Biggest variance there, of course, is under the salary categories. They came in quite a bit less than we had budgeted this time. That's because we purposely allowed expenditures to ESSER to reserve those funds for other needs for the next fiscal year. As you know, our funding runs a year behind on the ADM, so next year's funding will be based on what last year's ADM was. I haven't closed the fiscal year. Current year's money is based on last year. So we put a little bit of that money to the side to save for next year. So we purposely moved salaries to the ESSER funds. Okay, moving down to this gray area right here. We put quite a bit of money in those areas to cover for some expenditures. One, we're going to transfer some money to the building fund, which the district approved that last May. We're also going to move $238,000 to the child nutrition fund to cover assistance with that, with their labor costs there. And then if you look at the other areas, that's all restricted funding that will be carried into the next school year to be used for expenditures. Some of those expenditures are back orders. Some of them are for buses, some of them are for vehicles. We're going to buy computers for the CTE lab. So there's several things in there that are just delayed. A lot of things are still on the assembly lines that we're waiting on, so that's part of our problem with those back orders. And as you can see, we raised that ending fund balance to align with the payroll, because we want our ending balance to be 2 payrolls and 1 AP run. So we raised that to align with that. Any questions there?
Can you just explain a little bit about where the money came from again for the child nutrition transfer? The child nutrition transfer there, the 238. Where did that money? Where was it before we transferred it there?
So I'm going to move ahead so that can be easily explained. Child nutrition budget. You'll see the revenue expected and the salaries and expenditures that tie to that. Because we did not have as many kids in the buildings last year, obviously we didn't serve as many, but we still had contracts in place for, not working. We did not have contracts in place for all of those. Oh, you want it big.
Oh, look at that, Mr. IT.
Oh, tech
we
wizard.
bring the IT department right to
Like,
you.
oh, well, okay. He wanted it big. So we already had contracts written for employees. And so, we wanted to make sure that matched out. We anticipated, if you remember right, at this time last year, it was going to be close to maybe $1 million. But we had some unexpected support. One, we got some COVID money that was directly supposed to be used for child nutrition. And if you'll look right here at that 144, that was one last minute thing we just found out about 2 weeks ago. They're giving us some additional money for March, April, and May of 2020. 20. So they went back that far and gave some additional funding.
So can you point me to that 144? Sorry.
Right here. Right there. 145, 135. And then, about the middle of the year, then the government decided that lunches were going to be free for everyone. So that also helped with offsetting what we anticipated was going to be a transfer of a large amount, ended up being quite a bit less.
I've had some questions about child nutrition lately from constituents, and I feel like the funding for schools is always so tricky for people to understand. Child nutrition is sort of its own account, right? Like it has to, can you talk a little bit about how it has to pay for itself?
They don't have their own account. Essentially, it's having their own bank account, but they have their own fund source. Yes. And so they have to be self-sufficient. So the money that they make in the cafeteria for the sale of their meals and their reimbursement from the state has to match and offset their costs. And when they don't, and they have a negative balance, which in this case is what was going to happen, then the district's responsible for taking care of that. We cannot close the books with a negative balance on a fund source.
And what rules govern that? That's not the board's rule, right? That's the state's rule?
That is, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. All right, so we popped in the challenge. Let's go right back up here. All right, so any questions at all about the state and local expenditures and the ending balance? Okay.
You said it was 2 payrolls and what?
And 1 accounts payable run.
1 accounts payable, okay.
Yes. And so the payroll now, the monthly payroll is about, with fringes, is about $7 million. So that's $14 million, and then we put about $900,000 in there to the side for accounts payable run. Okay. All right. In the building fund, you'll see we have that transfer the board approved back in May. It was $3.6 million. We rounded it to $3.7 million just for an easy whole number transfer. On the expenditures, there is the maintenance rotations and the Chromebook rotation funding that the district approved several years ago. If you'll look at there, I have to transfer to bond projects the maintenance rotations. Those maintenance rotation projects were for floors, it was pavement, roofs, different things, and I'm making a recommendation that we move those expenditures over to the FCA bond funds because there's not a timeline on the building fund, there's a timeline on the bond funds, and we have a pretty large contingency balance there that we need to make a plan for. Okay, and then here is the bond issue, and you'll see there at the very last item listed is that other FCA building project where I'm moving that $960,000 over there in expenditures. I also have added FF&E line item for FCA projects. Capitol classroom and the root office. We just overlooked those furniture, so they're going to need some furniture in those, and so we just put another line item in there for that. Okay, and then on that site drainage, I totally backed that off because there's not really an invoice we're getting for just site drainage. We're getting an invoice on those FCA projects, and it's hard to tell what portion of that's drainage, what portion of that's walls. And so I just removed it completely because there's not a reason to have a separate place there because I'm never going to hit any expenditures there. And then up in the Ramey Woodland project, as y'all know, we never know what's going to happen behind walls or in the ground. And so we've hit some unforeseen things in those areas where we need to do a little drainage work, a little dirt work, and so we needed to bump that budget up just a little bit. So that's reflected on here as well. But even after all of those adjustments, we still have $3 million left in the contingency fund that we need to. We'll leave it there till we see what happens with athletics, that building, and then we'll go from there.
Did both Woodland and Ramey have unexpected drainage?
They did, both of them.
Are located in
Fayetteville. Yeah, it's surprising. I think Ramey was dirt work, maybe a little drainage, but over on the track area at Woodland is the drainage. The track is going in there.
so we have yet to approve the GMP on this other big project over
That is
here.
true.
And so I guess we'll have this conversation in October, but I'm just hoping, are we comfortable with that $3 million?
Well, if you'll notice,
I'm getting a
there
nod from the back of the room.
that
so I hope that-
we've kind of, like, when I moved some of that around, I made a little adjustment on the athletic building.
Oh, did you?
Just,
Okay.
yeah, just in case that happened, but we don't have the guaranteed maximum price yet at all.
Right, yeah, so.
But what you have to,
We got a nod and a clap? Okay, well, that's encouraging.
but one of the things to keep in mind is over in the building fund now, the ending balance is almost, it was 8,700,000. And so since we moved that 900,000 over, if we get to the end of these projects and we think, oh, we need a little bit of money,
Yeah.
you can always go back to the building fund and get some of that.
Okay.
You just don't have to have it done before March of 2023.
Right,
So that buys
right.
a little time.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Okay. All right. Any more questions on those projects? I know that was a lot of moving money around to align more with what the costs are going to be. Then we have federal funds. Right here in this area where you see the CARES funding, COVID relief funding, COVID other, that is the revenue that we use to offset those allowed expenditures. And it was mostly virtual teachers that we moved over there, their salaries. Those were allowed expenditures. And one of the beginning things that came out with this recent ARP money, the 11 million, was they said you had to spend all this money first before you could touch the other money. I think they backed off that a little bit, but we went ahead and just took care of business and got it all spent to make sure it's all been accounted for and received from the state. Okay, and then for the asterisk there is on other federal funding, I raised that budget. That is reflective of receiving the SOAR grant. I think you guys, Michelle, presented on that. We also got some pre-K federal CARES money there too for the pre-K program only. And that's what that ending balance is made up of. She is going to use that money this upcoming school year, and then the SOAR's money is next as well. Okay. And right back to child nutrition. We pretty much covered that. Her lunches have returned to more of what she expected before everything happened, and so that was good news. And we are still getting 100% reimbursed from the state on that.
Are commodities and stuff still harder to come by and more expensive? I feel like
Everything is.
Yeah.
Everything is right now. Everything that we try to order, from air conditioning to vehicles, to commodities, to food, costs are higher, and when you do get them, it's a wait. So that's a lot of what's going on right now. But yes.
Okay. Thanks, Linda.
And then, of course, the activity fund is reflected on what is allowed to do with students. So, of course, last year there was a lot of restriction, and we didn't have as many club interactions and student activities. So that, in turn, gets represented in the revenue received as well as the expenditures. And then just a quick summary of the fund balances, how they're going to end. Almost $50 million will for the state and local fund, building fund at $8.8 million, and then the bond issue still has the $99.6 in there for upcoming, and then $700,000 in the federal fund. Any questions? I know we covered this pretty deep at the workshop, so that was a fast review. But if you have any questions, and we just need board approval to hit the final button and send it to the state.
Do we have any more questions for Glenda? If not,
I just appreciate that with all the uncertainty that you and the team were facing at all levels, you know, that kind of holding the line and being as conservative as we possibly could in a negative situation has certainly provided for this year and years to come.
I feel that they, you know, budgeted that local tax at the 92%. I think we can change that for the upcoming year. We have a little bit more confidence maybe in the collection and what's happening there. And so that will help. But this was a nice thing that happened because we were able to support those bonuses that the teachers got, as well as we got to create a couple of line items for future teachers' growth in the future for our new middle school, as well as make a rotation line item for those computer labs. So that was pretty nice to be able to do that.
And so they intentionally keep the ARP funds, that budget separated from this budget that we have to turn in, right? We turned that in last month.
So this is the ending budget for fiscal year 21, and then next month you'll get the fiscal year budget for 22, the preliminary budget, which will include that.
Oh, it'll include it. Oh.
This is what's been spent and what's left, and then next year you'll get
So we do it
these
as a
34
part of it.
balances
Right,
along
right.
with the new money.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, then I'll accept a motion to approve this budget of expenditures.
Motion. Oh,
Go ahead.
Motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 final budget of expenditures as presented.
There's a motion from Megan and a second from Justin. Do we have any comment from the floor? Okay. You can come to the mic, please. Yes.
Name's John Patton. I'm just curious, is there a cost per unit on like kids' education, cost per child, both for kind of overall education and then the school, the food system, for the food allowances, kind of a cost per meal? Just how does that align with other school districts or states?
So are you referring to the cost of the expenditure or their revenues?
Just the expenses, like 120 million for overall expenditures, 10,000 students, at 12,000 per child. Okay, I'm just wondering how that compares to other districts in the state or other states.
I don't have that with me today, but I'll be glad to prepare that if the board wants to see that, and we can do that in the future. But yes, we have documents that do here. The state does one as well. You can look at the website in the for the Department of Ed. They have a line in there that shares all the different districts as well. Especially when you have to think about we're in a bigger corner, so our salaries are a little different maybe than our southern part of the state. So.
Any more questions from the floor? I guess I skipped over any more discussion from the board. Nope. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The budget carries 7-0.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Glenda.
Thank you so much, Glenda.
Okay, now we have Dr. Tucker with the student handbook.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Last month, the board approved several student policies, and after that, Mr. Wilburn worked his magic and updated the student handbook to include all of those previously approved policies. But we do need for you to approve the student handbook so it can be posted to the website.
All right. Any questions about the handbook for Dr. Tucker? No. Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve the student handbook.
I'll make the motion to approve the student handbook.
Okay, we have a motion from Katrina
I'll second.
and a second from Tracy. Is there any more discussion from the board on the handbook? No. Any questions from the floor or discussion about the student handbook? All right, no, then all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got Dr. Duncan with policy 3.1.
This is the policy that we discussed last month. This is for planning for our future, trying to be more organized and have a more concerted effort about being transparent with that organization and what that's going to look like in the future, and trying to align us with our counterparts across Northwest Arkansas.
I'm thrilled with this, the way that we've laid this out. And I know that we talked at length about it last month, but I just wanted to thank you again for the time that you invested in setting forth these protocols and, yeah, and the transparency.
Thank you. It's so good. We talked last time too about page 6 of this, which lays out the different groups, which I think is just so smart and really allows the district to be an excellent community partner. The way that we distinguish between groups that are character building, 501c3 organizations, community groups, and then for-profit groups, I think is just really, I don't know, I feel like it's the way it should be done, and I think you did an excellent job, so thank you so much. It's really smart.
Yeah, I really like it too. So, unless there are more questions for Dr. Duncan, I'll accept a motion to approve this policy 3.10.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Justin and a second from Katrina. Are there any more comments from the board, discussion, questions? Any questions from the floor regarding this policy? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that does it for old business. And we do have one new revised policy being presented by Dr. Tucker.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Student policy 5.7 is absences. We do have in our policy language that covers attendance for our Fayetteville Virtual Academy, but we did want to expand this policy to include an attendance requirement for those students that have to pivot temporarily, perhaps because of quarantine, to virtual learning. And so this policy is just being updated to include that language.
I can only imagine the challenge of having attended a number of work-related meetings with colleagues across the state, or having a board meeting, a completely virtual board meeting, and trying to take roll and know who's in attendance. So I can appreciate that there's this very specific approach to it, and hopefully we won't have to be dealing with it too much in the future.
I'm glad we have the hotspots available to be able to check out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do we still have the bus Wi-Fi systems that we have around the district?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Duncan on that.
Sorry.
We had buses that were parked in various locations across the city, which came with lots of fun accoutrements and surprises people would leave back for us after they used the Wi-Fi. And so we reworked that plan to where we have established those onto longer routes so that if kids have a longer drive to and from school, that they have connectivity through that process. So we started with the longest routes first and then got through as many as we can. So if that's something we want to think about for the future, to begin to outfit all of our buses, but our thought was, let's start with the longest routes first and we'll work our way in.
Okay. Thank you.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm just curious to know how many and this is probably not a question you're prepared to answer, but in terms of the kids that were absent from virtual learning last year, what percentage of those kids, was it an issue of not having access to the internet?
It typically was not. Our social work team did an outstanding job contacting families to see if they had connectivity. So much of the time, it was not an issue of access.
Okay.
And if they could not get to the bus location, remember we also had hotspots that we checked out to individual students or families that had specific needs, and those allowed them to tether at least 6. We did have families that had more than 6 that needed to tether, so in that case, we did 2 hotspots.
Dr. Tucker, with this, on the pivot to virtual learning, if we had a snow day, because we had one of these last year, right? We had a snow day that we did virtual. then this would apply in that situation, for
Yes,
example?
sir, it could.
Okay. Just want to make sure I was thinking that through right.
Yes, sir. Hopefully, we got all the snow out of our system last year, though. So, it should carry us through.
We'll see. It sounds kind of nice right now, actually.
It really does. Okay. Well, we will see this policy then next month.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Talbert, do you have anything else?
Ma'am, that's it.
That's everything. So this meeting is adjourned.